All right, welcome back to the channel here with the brand new, fresh off the presses China's War, the 13th edition to coin by designer Brian Train. Now, Brian has a long history with coin and board game design, but he was there with Volko for the design of Distant Plain. He also had the French-Algerian War. That one was the first, I think, two-player, or it might have been the first three-player, I've forgotten. I think it's the first two-player. But I think it was one of, if not the first, to lower the player count. And I think the French-Algerian War was the one that changed the eligibility thing, the eligibility tracker in the coin system that has been used in a lot of the other ones. Now, I could be wrong, maybe it was the second one to do that, but I think it was the first, and it's been kind of taken over into a lot of the irregular conflict series games and those sorts of things. So Brian has been really involved in coin from a very early stage, and he has of course, other great designs outside of just coin. But as it pertains to this series, this is the latest installment and his latest addition to it. So I will confess I have already opened and punched everything just because I don't really see the point in showing you me taking the cellophane off. Maybe that's really your thing, but to me it's just fiddly. So I could show you what it looks like when you open it after you've done just this as well. So here's the rules. I'll get to this in a second. This is the new, it kind of started with the Gandhi game, the new non-player bot that runs off that same system. That's super sleek and very nice. The playbook and rules books, these are in that pretty standard now. This is a matte paper. They've kind of gone back and forth with a couple of things, but after seeing some discussion in the chat for the Cross Brooklyn Expressway, some people were complaining about the rule books, and they were like, hey, some people like to write in theirs, so we made them like this. So it is, it's still very beautifully made, very typical GMT quality. I can't remember which one it was. It was a very recent release that I got from them. Maybe it was Red Dust Rebellion that was more glossy, but they've kind of gone back and forth. But the general consensus, it seems, is that they're going to be using the matte from here on out. So if you look at actual rules, it is 15 pages. Now, one of those in the beginning is, or technically they count this as 1, 2, so this second page here is largely introduction. So, 13 to 15 pages of rules is very light. Doesn't feel like maybe some of the others in the coin series that are super, super heavy. So there's your rule book. Your playbook, of course, is going to be longer. It includes tutorial and some of the non-player information. Here is your, example of play that is pretty standard through GMT games. Once again, illustrated with diagrams of exactly what's going on when they are, reading it out for you in the text. Here are the event tips and background, so they tell you a little bit about maybe what you should do with them. And then the background, once again, pretty normal stuff here. Nothing out of the ordinary for a GMT game. And then you've got all of the history in the back. This is not the first game that Brian has done on the war in China, and that stage, both pre-war and during the start of the Second World War. So he is certainly knowledgeable on the conditions and history of it, and of course a nice bibliography there in the back. So another nice addition to the playbooks. Here is the non-player, and I'll show you the cards in just a bit to give you an idea, but there are, very typical, terms, sequences, all of these things. Nothing too crazy, and I'll show you the cards for it a little bit later. Once again, with its own dedicated, playthrough that you would typically get in the playbook. It has its own here inside the reference booklet. So, very nice. Of course, 4 of the player aids and these are glossy. This is pretty standard. I don't think this is really very much different than any of the other ones that you're used to seeing in the coin series. So if you have some other ones, this will be pretty normal. But it tells you the 4 factions: the Nationalist, which is, the Kuomintang, very, Chiang Kai-shek and all that. The CCP, or this, what you're pretty much used to with Mao Zedong, and then the Japanese, who you would expect to be in a war, in a game about the war in Japan. And then this 4th faction, which are the warlords, which is a bit more of an abstraction, a collection of multiple factions and individuals, and so it's kind of the most abstracted of all of them. So very nice. We can talk more about those operations and those things later. And then you have the non-player sheets. So very similar to what you'll see in any of the systems that use these priorities, what they're going to do and where they're going to do it. As my cat makes an appearance here, it is pretty standard stuff. She's going to try and knock a tripod over, as she is wont to do. And event instructions for the non-player as well, what you should do when the specific card comes up. So very nice that they put this in its own fold out kind of them to do. And then your very typical propaganda round. This one very sparsely colored. Thought it was funny that it is so just black and white. That's all it is, black and white. So it tells you about the assault on the back, which, like some other coin games, is a little bit more fleshed out than your typical, rolling some dice. I have 5, you have 4, I hit this many, and so on and so forth. Now, what everyone wants to see, the map. I'll unfold this in just a minute. I will say, I like the map. It feels very dated to me, but not in the way of it feels like it's from the 30s and 40s. From the time period, it feels like an early coin game, just with the graphic design. I think some of the newer ones have still kept this, very green and sort of thing, and we'll look at it more later, but that's my first impression, is it still feels like an old coin game, which I don't necessarily know is a good thing. It's not really a bad thing either, but I don't love the way that it looks. I'm not in love, I should say, with the way that it looks, unlike some others. So we have all the very typical pieces of a coin game. I'll show you the cards first. Here are the cards, and I can get these a little closer to you, but they have the eligibility here in the middle, and then your very typical 2 sides of the event, shaded and unshaded, and nothing really new on the cards. So we can get to the propaganda cards here at the back, which have some very beautiful art on them, propaganda posters, Japanese propaganda, some communist propaganda, and then maybe more of the nationalists and those sorts of things. So all very well designed, very pretty. And then the card backs, which is just a mirror of the front of the cover. So nothing different there, but I like it a lot. It's very stark red. I like the colors they went with. It's very nice. Here are the Wukong. Here we go. These also look exactly like any ones you've seen before since the Gandhi series. I love these bots. These to me are miles better than the flowcharts that you see in Fire in the Lake and Outside a Coin in like Labyrinth. I mean, the bots are effective, like they do what they're supposed to, but these to me are a lot easier to use because we all know with these coin games, the real challenge is playing against opposed players. And I'm not expecting to have that same level when I play a bot. So I want it to really have an ease of access more than anything else over the true nature of how the bot would play. So I think these do a good job of being accurate and trying to be as lifelike as possible, given that it is just a couple of cards, but also still being accessible enough that I can just pick them up and use them. So let me start shoving some of these back in here. It's very typical on the pieces, wooden cubes and cylinders. So you have the Japanese here in this tan. You've got the Warlords in this kind of like mango-y color. The blue are the Nationalists, and I believe these are the Nationalist Police, I think. And the red are the Communists. Most of the Communist pieces are going to be the cylinder, or sorry, the hexagons, or actually the octagonal. The typical insurgent pieces that we're used to seeing. The Nationalists have a few, and then there are none for the Warlords and for the Japanese, as would make sense. So I can pull these out here in a second. At the end of this video, I'm going to go ahead and set up the first scenario, or the campaign scenario, because I plan on playing this through. So you'll get to see a couple of these pieces really up close, just kind of showing you what's in the box. Support and opposition. There is support and opposition in this one, which isn't always a guarantee in coin games or the irregular combat series nowadays. Some control, which fluctuates between Nationalist and the Warlords. And you may be saying, what about the Japanese? Well, I'll get to that in a second. You're just general, markers to mark the overflows and some specific events. So nothing too crazy there. These are some more markers like victory and other random events, as well as the extra pieces. As with all coin games, they come with one extra piece for each, which is always awesome in case you lose something. So there is a bit extra just for you to kick around and leave in the box. And Terror Sabotage, once again, very familiar for coin players. Sabotage and Terror, it's going to work kind of in the same way that you're used to. And of course, 4 dice. These are little mini dice. Do I like the big dice better? Yes. Am I upset that they came with smaller dice? No. I don't think it makes that big of a difference. These remind me of the dice from Ahoy. If you've ever played Ahoy, the little region dice. So they are small, little puny little dice, but it's fine. I'm not going to be upset about the size of these dice. So let me get the board out here. The orientation is not north to south, which may throw some people off. I think it's west to east. It looks out towards the South China Sea and the Pacific and the Sea of Japan and all that are kind of off in those areas. So there we go. So you can see here, fairly big board. I don't know how many provinces there are here, but there are no cities. That's kind of one of the big pieces of this one. The cities aren't that important, but the lines of communication are these LOCs. It's actually the way that the Japanese will gain victory in this. So they are purely concerned with the control over those lines of communications. Of course, there are others as well, but they kind of folded the cities in to these larger provinces because, of course, this is probably the coin game with the largest numbers as far as like population and those things go. So I can't remember exactly what the ratio is here with a three population province, but it's literally millions upon millions of people because, of course, the nature of China. So it's going to be a different scale than a lot of times we're used to. So of course, the communists will start, kind of up here in the mountains, and the Japanese will be over here. They can be in Manchukuo, but nobody else, none of the Chinese can be in Manchukuo, and so they'll kind of use this as their base to come down, and they can do naval operations to jump in other places. You got French Indochina down here, Vietnam, Laos, all of that no one can enter. It's completely out of play. And you have your traditional roads and then your rivers as well, which are going to be incredibly important for the Japanese player. And of course, these are still considered cities, but of course, they're not actual locations. So yeah, maybe you can see what I mean here. Oh, by the way, these are railroads. I should be clear, not just regular roads. You might can see what I mean here. It to me feels very like 90s, early 2000s on the design. Everything outside of these, these kind of feel pretty standard to what we're used to with a coin game and the tracker and all this. But the color palette and some of the design here feels like earlier versions. Kind of feels like a distant plane a little bit. Kind of feels somewhat like the older coins, like Indian Abyss. These really bright greens. It doesn't have these are obviously plains, so they don't have the little jungle look that the Indian Abyss ones did. But I don't know. It's a minor thing. It doesn't really impact my thoughts on the game at all. It just kind of feels a little dated, in my opinion. So this is what the game will look like when you get it out of the box. What I'm going to do here is go in and set up the campaign scenario. Like I'm going to go set up the game, and then I'll come back and show you, and we can get some close-ups of everything that's going on here on this board. All right, so here is the 1938 setup. There is 2, 37, and 38. It's basically just one of the propaganda cards. It's 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. So technically 5 years, but I guess it's 2. So we're basically taking one of those out. And as you can see here, it's a beautiful array of colors as of any coin game. And I think with the pieces on here, the design, the graphic design that is, is grown on me a little bit. I think the colors mesh really well together, and I haven't seen this kind of mango-y color before, which is quite nice. So it is, I think it looks better with everything on the board and kind of arrayed out. So as I said earlier about the Japanese, you can see here as I kind of had it set up with some of the pieces laid out in the bags. The Japanese are gonna enter in through these coastal provinces, as they've done here. This is, of course, like the big invasions into Shanghai and everything. And a couple of interesting quirks in this coin that are very slight, but will probably be easy to miss for people who have played a lot of this. And when I say frustrating, I don't mean it's going to be a bad rule. I just mean it's going to be you're going to miss this rule and have to keep reminding yourself that that's the way it is. 2 big changes to control. 1, only active pieces count to control. So for instance, here, I don't believe that this is correct. They should not have control here. But if, for instance, all of these pieces over here were all the same, or if it was like this, I guess, if it was 4 pieces of one faction and 4 pieces of another, well, these are all not active, so they actually don't count towards control. So unlike in a lot of or all the other coin games, I think, in fact, even when cells are underground, they still count towards control. That is not the case. Or here's a good example. In Henan, you can see there are 2 opposition or other pieces opposed to the Nationalists, and they still have control there, because until this guerrilla piece is flipped over, it doesn't count. The other big one is the Japanese don't count for control at all. That is their troops. These are Japanese police. And police in this game, the rule book basically says is collaborators and people that are helping the Japanese invaders. So, the Japanese troops didn't very often spend a lot of time out in the provinces. They kind of stuck to the major cities and lines of communication. So those police units and collaborators can kind of be their existing presence in some of these provinces. So they count. These white cubes will count for control, but the tan cubes will not. So if you look up here in Shandong, there are a bunch or 3 Japanese troops and 3 warlord pieces or 3 warlord troops Normally that would mean that no one controls it, but the Japanese pieces do not contribute to control, so it is uncontrolled. Another example that goes to the previous one I was stating was here in Jiangsu. There are 5 Japanese troops. The Japanese don't care about control, so there are no control markers for them, but there are 2 guerrilla pieces for the nationalists, and they don't control the space. Now, I don't think, even in the past, I think you still had to be active in order to control, but this is an example of that they would need to be active in order to control that space. So that is a example, and here I'm almost done with the setup. Is an example in one on. There are 4 pieces total, 2 and 2, but those communist guerrillas are not. They are not active, and so therefore they do not count towards control. So small changes, like it doesn't really change anything. It just means that you're going to be playing the game differently, but there are no real structural changes. Just a way that you have to pay attention to the game a little bit closer. So what I'll do here is kind of walk us through the victory conditions for the teams, kind of tell you a little bit about that and what you can expect there. And then I think I'm going to go through the tutorial and kind of take you card by card through what that is, so you can kind of see what all the actions do. So the 4 different factions, we'll start off with the kind of most straightforward and most familiar are the communists, and they just need opposition and bases, which is very common for the insurgent faction in coin games. So they just want to place out bases and switch the support to opposition and neutral to opposition. So right now in this scenario, they're on 9 of their 21 that they need. 21 or above, of course. The Japanese are very interesting. All the other ones are kind of, actually I'll do the warlords next, because theirs are very counterinsurgent focused. They need control in bases, so they feel a lot like the Arvin in Fire in the Lake. So they're kind of, Arvin's role is kind of split into 2 factions here, and you'll understand what I mean in just a second. They don't care about support, they care about control. They're going to be contesting that control very directly with the nationalists. The nationalists don't care about control for their victory condition, but those are the only 2 factions that can actually control things. So they'll be in direct conflict with them. So they just want bases and control. They don't care about what the people think. They're kind of removed from that whole ideological battle. So they're pretty straightforward as well. Then the 2 that are a little bit different, we'll go with the nationalists first. They are interested in support, so they're directly in conflict with the communists on support, directly in conflict with the warlords on control, trying to lower their victory conditions. And then they also have patronage, which works a lot like patronage from Fire in the Lake. So that's kind of where Arvin are split. And it works kind of the same way. It's political, military capital that Chiang Kai-shek had to try and unify China during that era. So the patronage marker is that little circle up at the top of your screen, and that combines with support, and they're trying to get 41 or greater. The warlords need 26 or greater for their control, for their victory. And then lastly, you have probably the strangest one of them all, which is the Japanese. And I think like throughout Coin, there's always, outside of the original base games, which were like kind of the same thing, reskinned, few different rules to kind of change things up. Since we've started to get into like what I would consider a little more wacky, or a little like Red Dust Rebellion, for example, there's like a couple in there that have very different objectives and ways that they can win and stuff like that. In this one, that kind of outlier faction is the Japanese, where they're kind of focused on doing something totally different. Liberty or Death had, I think, the French and the Indians in that one. The Native Americans were kind of the same way, and they had like very different objectives that they were trying to reach, as opposed to like normal coin games. So they don't care about control, and they don't care about support. That doesn't matter to them insofar as they're trying to deny other people the ability to win off of those victory conditions. But they don't care and they can't contribute to control. They can just deny it. What they want is the control of LOCs. So each LOC point is worth 1. So if they have a troop on this railroad, that's 2 points, 2 points for their victory. So they're just trying to go out, control the major arteries of both trade and supply and those sorts of things. And commitment, which is kinda-ish similar to the way it works in Fire in the Lake. It is tied to the amount of troops that they can have. It feels very similar to the U.S. in that they don't have like a direct hand in what's going on. You'll understand what I mean by this. They're the invaders in that situation. They're not really trying to prop anybody up. Everyone is their enemy here. They don't really care about any other faction, and of course there will be those very traditional sorts of negotiations and alliances that we both saw historically and that you see crop up a lot in Coin, where factions will align with one another to kind of tamp down on one faction that's in the lead. But that commitment number, the rulebook says basically is a representation of the commitment to the war in China between that and the Strike North faction, which is, attacking the Soviet Union, and then the Strike South faction that is more focused on the Central and South Pacific. And so obviously you need in order to have victory here, if you thought about it, you're not really the Japanese as a whole, you're perhaps the Japanese army leadership that are focused on the China campaign. So you want your superiors to be focused on and committed to victory on this front. And so when that commitment level goes down, whether you're doing poorly in China or whatever, that attention is being put to other places, and it's taking away from the amount of resources and troops that you can commit towards your objective. So I think when you look at it that way, it's really fun because you're competing. It feels like you're competing against yourself almost, where we got to get this commitment up. We've got to make sure our attacks are successful because, we could, shock the leaders in Japan with how poorly we're doing. So theirs is definitely the most different as opposed to others. But a lot of this does feel like Fire in the Lake. The more and more I'm kind of being around it, in some of the similarities the factions have. So a lot there for you, but that's how everybody wins, and what you can expect from those factions. So in the tutorial, all the deck is already built, and I have it here. And you flip one card and then you flip the second. So Chemical Warfare here is the second card, and the active card is Troutman Mediation. And so just because I'm not going to go too deep into all of this like a playthrough, which I hope to be able to do later, I'll just tell you about what the tutorial says they're going to do here. So all factions are eligible, as this is the start of the 38 scenario, and the Japanese here are listed first. You can see that they are the Tan, Nationalist, Communist, and the Warlords. So they're listed first. They'll have the first option to act here, and despite the fact that this sequence of play is like rotated, normally it's like this way, that makes sense. It's the same, it works the same. So they are going to act first, and they are going to bring more forces onto the board with the deploy special activity. So let me go ahead and grab one of these player aids and flip it on back here to the Japanese. So they've got recruit, patrol, sweep, and assault. That is very standard for a coin faction, if you will. I guess that's what you would consider the Japanese coin. So that's pretty normal. The Nationalists share the same thing. And then you have recruit, patrol, sweep, and assault, which is, of course, the same as well. So really, it's like 3 coin factions and then the one insurgent faction where they have rally, march, attack, and agitate. So it's interesting in that the balance is a little bit different. Not to say it's all one against the communists, which it isn't. It can be that sometimes, of course, and then of course everyone has their own unique special activities. So that's pretty standard. So they're going to take this deploy action here on the special activities, which allows them to place and withdraw troops, and they can place them in up to 3 coastal provinces. So this is kind of that naval action I was talking to you about. Clearly, if you've seen the 37 update, there are no 37 setup. There are no Japanese troops in China. They're all up here in Manchukuo, and so they will clearly just landed along in these areas. So to keep going on that, they will cost 3 resources from their 24, so they'll go down to 21. I like these, by the way, these eligibility and resource markers, because they are beveled ever so slightly, and so they're a little textured, which is nice. It's a small touch, but I like it a lot. I don't know, is the Warlord does as well. Yeah, here's the yin and yang, and it's kind of hard to tell, but they are beveled, which is, like I said, small, but I like it a lot. So it costs them 3 resources to do this, and it can move up to 6 Japanese troops to be moved from available and 3 coastal provinces. So they're going to take 4 troops from available and move them to Guangdong, and then take 2 more and place them in Guangxi. So 4 to Guangdong, just down here in the south. This is west to east. So here in Guangdong, and 2 in Guangxi. And that will not affect control. See, there's my first, I was like, oh, that's going to change control, and it has nothing to do with it. So that is me already kind of instinctively sticking my hand out there to change control. Then they're going to need to so they're taking the ops and special activity. Then they're going to need to do an operation over here, and they are going to try and get more lines of communications controlled. So they're going to do sweep, which acts like sweep in every other sense. And so with that, they are going to, it doesn't cost them 3 to do the special activity. That's on me. It costs them 3 to do sweep. So it's just 3 total per destination space. So that is a little bit different. So, they use patrol, which is 3 total. Patrol works the same way that it normally does. So it's just 3 total. And then if you were to add any assault, and so they're going to start in Shanghai. And here's a great example of the way that this faction is different, where like in the US still cares about control, at least a little bit, in Fire in the Lake, because those control can be used to eventually change the populace's minds. Like they can then use that for whatever it's called, governance or something like that, to change opposition to support. Japanese just don't care. So they are going to fan out from Shanghai. So it costs them 3, which I've already spent, and you can move it onto adjacent spaces. So you basically select the space, Shanghai, that costs 3, and then you can move elsewhere. So they're going to actually be able to move to 5 spaces. So the 2 LOCs that are directly adjacent to Shanghai. Let's see if I can't get a little zoom in here and a pan up just to get you a better angle of it here. So they're going to get the 2 that are adjacent, and then these are also adjacent, 1, 2, 3, because you can go, these little town spaces, the termination of these LOCs are considered adjacent. So these 2 spaces are adjacent, these 2 spaces are adjacent, this space is adjacent to this LOC, and so on and so forth. There's actually 5 LOCs, which works out really nice. They can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's going to boost their victory by a ton. So that's going to take their victory up. Let's see if it says actually in here. Yeah, 22 to 32. So it's going to be 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 from the total combined value of those LOCs. So they just kind of immediately are able to bump up. So commitment stays there, and they have an additional 10, so that'll take them up to 33. So that's an example. They don't really care what happens in Shanghai. They don't need control or anything like that, so they're just going to jump right on to those LOCs to boost their victory condition. So very different than what you might see in other games. So they are done with theirs. And let's see what it says here. The Nationalists are next eligible and may choose from a limited operations. So that's what's next year. Event or limited operations. And they decide to perform their own limited patrol. So the Nationalists are up next on the Troutman mediation card. You can see it right there. And so they're going to go next. And they're going to take that same set of operations they have available to them, and they are going to do their own limited patrol. So the player moves both nationalist troops from Xizang to the adjacent 3 Econ Railroad LOC, which is going to be, let me see here. And actually there's going to be a few more of the LOCs that they're going to move here. Let me see. I want to make sure. Patrolling. Okay. So that's later on. Never mind. As well as both of the troops. So they're going to go from here onto this 3 railroad, because they, once again, they can get through Hangzhou to see that 3 railroad. Moves both of them to that, as well as both the warlord troops. So, and there's a special rule here, as well as both of the warlords in China's war during patrol and sweep operations. Each nationalist troop move may bring along 1 warlord troop by giving resources to the warlord player. In this case, the nationalist pays 1 resource to the warlord to bring along warlord troops to any number of patrol destinations. And so they'll pay 2 for the patrol itself and 1 to the warlords for moving their troops, bringing nationalist resources down to 4. And the warlords up to 7. So right here, they're going to bring along the warlord troops, and they're all going to come over here to this railway. And that should reduce, they're actually going to do assault as well. So if you read on this patrol, so you can pay, then on each LOC, optionally activate 1 CPC guerrilla for each Chinese troop now there, if desired, may free assault on 1 LOC. So they don't have to worry about any guerrillas, but then they would get a free assault. So they'll be able to do that here. So let me get all the dice and everything for that, and I'll come back. Okay, so here's the assault here on this LOC. There are different procedures for assault than kind of normal. So let's see if I can fit this in here. Each unit has a combat value, and those are a little bit different than some other ones. So the Japanese troops are 2 combat value each, and the Nationalist and Warlord troops are 1 combat value each. So you tally up that number, which would be 4 for the Nationalist and Warlords, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 for the Japanese, since they have 1 cube there worth 2. So it's 4 against 2. You roll the dice, and you're trying to roll equal to or less than. I can double check that it's not just less than. There's also a nice little thing right here. Yeah, equal to or less than is right there, equal to or less than. So they were looking for 4, the Japanese were looking for 2, and they both are good here. So if that's the case, if you do roll equal to or less than, you remove combat value equal to the roll that you had. So in this instance, the Japanese will remove 1, and throughout this, the faction executing the assault chooses what's going to be removed. So for the Nationalist, they can choose that a Warlord cube is removed to casualties, which is off the zoomed in area you have here. Then the Nationalist will remove 3 combat values worth, which this is 2. So there you go. That'll remove to casualties. Now, the way this works is it's kind of like a rounding up system. It doesn't really say rounding up, but imagine if there were 2 Japanese troops in this, and they had to remove 3 combat value. So that's 3 combat value, but the 2 cubes, the 2 Japanese, are 4 combat value, 2 and 2. So in that instance, you would still have to remove both Japanese cubes because you're removing 3. 2 of them takes 1 of the cubes. You still have a combat value left to remove. So you take that other second Japanese cube, if that makes sense. You always have to fulfill all of the losses, even if that means removing a cube that had more combat value than you had remaining. So 3 losses to 4 combat value would still take both the Japanese cubes. So there's the example of an assault. It's not complicated. It's probably easier than in Liberty or Death, which was always, I thought, a bit, complicated. Not complicated, but just complicated for this system. There was a lot of moving bits, and that moves the Japanese victory from 33 down to 30. So there is an example of an assault, and that will take place for card 1. I'll walk us through the next card for sure. Whether or not I go beyond that, I'll determine later, but there is patrol and assault. Okay, I'll do this last card and then cut it here because the video is getting kind of long, and I hope to do a playthrough of this anyway, so you'll see a lot of this, but it should give you an idea of some of the new things. So we're through with that first card. The next card is Chemical Warfare. The Chinese are first eligible, and they and the Warlords are eligible on this card. So they're going to do 2 attacks, or I believe they're called attacks for them. They're going to do 2 attacks, one of which they will pair with the ambush special activity, which is exactly like you have seen in every other coin game. So with their first attack, it's going to be here on this LOC. It's one of the parts that's special about the setup for this one I didn't see earlier. You basically set it up for 1938 and then add these 2, which were a part of that first patrol action the Japanese took. So anyways, it's just an example of play. So their attack here, they roll, and it's not like the assaults. They just roll, and they're trying to roll equal to or less than the number of active pieces that they have. They have 2, so 1 is enough, and they will remove, and I'll just read precisely here from the attack. Roll the die. If the result is equal to, remove 2 Japanese cubes, all to casualties, and remove 1 guerrilla, and reduce 1 prestige for each Japanese troop removed. So this will remove 2, which is into casualties, which I believe is just out of frame here. It's right up here. They'll lose both of their guerrillas as well. And because they rolled a 1, will gain 1 back. And that'll also reduce patronage by 2, which is a part of the victory condition for the Nationalists. And then they will also do 1 more, which is going to be a part of the assault. So the ambush. It's going to be down here in Shaanxi. And in this instance, instead of activating however many guerrillas they want to use in this, all they do is flip up 1. They remove 1 Japanese cube, and they don't have to lose 1 of their own. It's one of the things about their attack action is that they have to, basically they're sacrificing their own troops for the removal of others. So what does it really gain you? And it does still reduce patronage by 1. Actually, it does remove theirs as well. Attack as follows. Activate only that 1 and remove 1 to casualties. For each 1 removed, remove the guerrilla. So they still do lose this guy. I was incorrect there. And they still do reduce. But it's basically like a guaranteed hit that they will get in. And that once again would lower patronage and the victory condition. So then, as according to the playbook, the Nationalists are up next. The Communists took the op and special activity, and so then they have the option of a limited op like the Nationalists took, or the event, and they're going to take the event here, which is a capability. For those of you who've used this or played this series before, you know capabilities last throughout the rest of the game, and they're going to take this top one here. Anti-bandit action does not place terror. What the hell does any of that mean? First of all, let me find, there is a little chip for this. Here it is. And you can place it on this side. Anti-bandit is a special activity for the Japanese. In this game, terror works a little bit differently. You can see up here on the top of your screen, there's a terror marker. It's only placed by the Japanese, and it is a pure negative thing. Whereas like in Andean Abyss, you might use terror a lot as the AUC to get rid of opposition or support to lower your opponent's victory conditions. This like removes everything. Like it just kind of, it's just bad. And so it's just used by the Japanese to kind of come in and wipe everything out, as was pretty historical. So in this game now, the anti-bandit action will not place terror. So it does other things. It removes guerrillas from the spaces selected, and reduces patronage if you are able to remove bases, if you get basically everything else out, and it would set that place to neutral and place a terror marker. But now, of course, it won't set a terror marker. So that's a capability that will be in for the rest of the game. So terror is a little bit different in this one. So, all right, well, that is a little brief unboxing and overview of China's War by GMT Games and Brian Train. Great production quality as always. It seems like a lot of fun. I'm hoping to kind of move this right on into a playthrough and at least get through a little bit, if not the rest of the game from the 38 campaign onwards. But there is another wrinkle. It's another wrinkle, and it's actually, I was reading the first from World War II. So, you know, the one that's about Finland is pretty close to World War II, you know, kind of being in that time around the Russian Revolution, but nothing directly involved in the theater of the Second World War. So that's really unique, and I love games that are about China. It's just so just undercovered. There's just not many games in this space, in the war game space, that are on China. And when you look at World War II games, they're largely, I mean, you think about what is it called? Empire of the Sun. I mean, there is no, you don't even do the China part. It's just kind of simulated. You commit units there, and it's kind of like an off-board role. So there's just not a lot about China, whether that be in World War II or kind of in general. It's just an undercovered area. And so it's considering the cultural heft and historical significance of China, not just in World War II, but throughout all of history, it's kind of a disservice. So being able to see a game like this come out is really, really awesome. And there are a few wrinkles that I quite like. The Japanese are very different than any faction I've seen in Coin. And then the relationship between the warlords and the nationalists, where the warlords are kind of just below the nationalists, like kind of subordinate to them in a lot of ways, but still trying to, you know, suborn them as one of their actions, you know, in some points, and trying to, you know, be involved in their actions while also forging their own path. And that's really interesting. And one small wrinkle is the victory conditions for them. Their victory condition, I told you earlier on, is set at 26. So they want control and bases. But at the end of the game, that's actually different. So let me pull it up here just to be exact. But their victory condition is compared to patronage at the end. So their total control populations plus bases is going to be subtracted from patronage. And so that is very interesting and different. And from the game design notes, basically just like the positioning of a warlord to depose Chiang Kai-shek as kind of the nationalist leader, or, you know, the warlords kind of taking over the professional army, quote unquote professional army, the Nationalists possessed. So a whole new edition, 13 of them in the series now. That's kind of hard to believe that there have been so many. But it's going to always be hard to beat Red Dust Rebellion for the biggest change or most different to the series, but there are some more new changes that I think will be fresh and different, while still feeling very similar. I don't think that this one is quite as extreme in its changes as opposed to like Liberty or Death, which was pretty radical in its changes for the time, or as different as some of the 3-player and 2-player ones have been as well. So it's still very simple in my opinion, unlike the Finland one that has a lot of little bits and bobs that kind of are attached to it. This one's, in my opinion, still very straightforward and feels like a coin game that just has some tweaks, as opposed to that one. And then Red Dust Rebellion, which is so different that it's like learning the series all over again. But as new ones come out, I'm still really looking forward to the Pure Land, which is about Japan. And I've really enjoyed the regular Conflict series games. Vijayanagar is fantastic, and I'm playing as much as I can on Rally the Troops because it's on there as well. And D and Abyss is also on Rally the Troops. And if some of you are hesitant to play any of those online, I cannot stress how good they are on there. They're so much fun, and I'm on there all the time. So playing, not just those, but others as well. So hope you enjoyed this one. Hope to get into a playthrough of it very, very soon. But enjoy another great addition to the Coin series by Brian Train.